I purchased the Aeroe rear rack as a way of replacing the seat post pack across multiple bikes. While seat post packs are great, minimal and easy to swap between bikes, they just do not last for me when using them week in, week out. The Aeroe rack was one rack that could fit across all three of my bikes, so I wanted to give it a go. After living with it on a nearly 4,000 mile journey around Europe, I wanted to share my final thoughts on this rack, how it is held up, what it is like to use, and any issues I have faced. Just in case you didn't watch the original first look impressions video of this rack, which I'll link below, I'll briefly give a little introduction what this rack actually is. Where the Aeroe rack differs from a lot of conventional racks, that it is a clamp-on rack that attaches to the seat stays on the bicycle, meaning it will fit nearly every bike, mounts or not, which was the selling point for me as I needed it to be able to fit all three of my bikes, from a road bike to a bike with much bigger 2.6 inch tyres. This version of the rack can actually fit tyres up to over 3 inches though. It's not a particularly light rack at around 970 grams, and with a weight limit of 16 kilograms or 8 kilograms for carbon frames, it will add some weight to your bike. Not that you can really notice this when you're actually riding though, especially on a loaded bike. Attaching the rack to the seat stays is as simple as tightening a couple of straps after the initial setup, so switching between bikes is about as much work as removing a seat post bag from one bike and adding it to another. Perhaps very slightly more work, as you will need to grab an Allen key to loosen and tighten a couple of bolts. But ultimately, it was very easy and quick to switch between bikes. Just to clarify, I purchased this with my own money, so Aeroe have no say in what I am going to say about this rack. I got to test this rack on a shorter, very wet and muddy route around Wiltshire as a little test run, and then spent the next 3 months with it on a much longer tour around Europe that ended up being nearly 4,000 miles long, on all different types of terrain, from smooth tarmac to gravel roads to the Bosnian countryside, snow, wind, rain and everything in between, hiker bike sections and super fast descents. So I have gotten a good feel for what this rack is like to use over time, day in, day out. I want to start with the way it clamps to your bike and my experience with this setup. In the first video, a lot of people were commenting with concerns regarding the clamping of the frame, which is understandable. Now, I've got to say, I am no engineer, so I can't give you reassurance whether it's good for your frame or not. But I think when you look at how the clamping system works here, it's not two solid pieces clamping down from either side onto the seat stays. One side is just a rubberized strap. So I think you would really struggle to tighten that strap enough that it could break your frame. There is always going to be a little give in the fabric of the strap. You are only really tightening it to the point that the rack is not slipping. It's hard to really show this on video, but the strap and the clamp really don't feel like they are causing any real stress to the frame at all. However, I would highly recommend making sure to use some frame protection, as while the rack is stable and I experience no slippage at the mounting point, the vibrations will cause it to rub a very small amount on your frame, which can of course start rubbing away at your paint, especially when it gets dirty and gritty. So frame protection is a must when using this rack. When using this rack day to day, it does exactly what I wanted from it, and that was to hold all the stuff I needed to keep dry so I could get on with the riding. It's quick and easy to attach your dry bags, and then you just forget about it when you start riding, which is exactly what you want. Whether I was pedaling through rough terrain or smooth roads, the rack is very stable and it's easy to forget it's there. I found there was very little movement. There is a slight vibration in the cradle when going over really rough terrain, but after about 4,000 miles I haven't experienced any fatigue or cracks in the cradle itself. I do believe that if this rack was to fail anywhere, it probably would be the cradle itself, just from the constant vibrations. I would predict that at some point it would weaken the material and possibly could crack, although I'd imagine it would take quite a while, especially as long as you are not overloading the cradle with excessive weight. Fortunately, this part is replaceable though, albeit not that cheap. I didn't buy the official Aeroe bags designed for this rack because, well, to be honest, they are quite pricey. While I wouldn't necessarily recommend buying those bags either, because I do think they are just a bit overpriced for dry bags, I do think it is a good idea to get some kind of dry bag that has strap guides to give you a bit of reassurance that the bags are not going to go anywhere. While I had no issues using the Topeak dry bag that came with my Topeak backloader on the Aeroe rack with an outer restrap dry bag, during my journey around Europe, I did manage to drop the bag the very first time I used this rack when going around Wiltshire. This was entirely user error though from my part, from simply just not tightening the included straps enough. It takes a bit of practice to kind of feel how tight it needs to be before the bag will not fall off. And also that bag was tapered, so it made the tightening a little bit more awkward. When first getting this rack, the straps feel a bit stiff, but they do loosen up over time and become easier to clamp down. I feel the included straps are strong and robust enough to hold all your gear without any worry. You could of course carry a spare strap as a backup, but I would personally trust the longevity of the included straps to do the job for a good long while. I have had an overall really good experience with the Aeroe rack, so it is actually quite hard to find many negatives. For me, the only thing that comes to mind is because I use dynamo lights, which are connected by a cable. The way I had the rack set up with the cradle above the wheel did interfere with light visibility a bit. I don't think this would affect most people using this rack, as you can either add the cradles to the sides or attach the lights directly to the rack itself. It's just that mine are relying on a cable and with a big bike, and the cable's just not quite long enough without getting it replaced to be even longer. The rack is a little on the heavy side, so if weight is important to you, this rack might not make sense. The retail price is also a little on the high side, but it is sitting in a very niche area of the market. It's really designed for people with full suspension mountain bikes or bikes with no rack mount options. Although more and more racks are now coming out with through axle mounting options, so this rack sits in a very weird sort of place. Personally though, I actually see that as a positive for this rack, because when you need to remove a wheel, you don't need to do anything with the rack, which you would have to if you were using through axle mounted racks. The only other very minor negative I experienced was that I lost one of the little strap retainers that stop the strap flapping in the wind. I have no idea how or where it went, but it fell off somewhere, and it really didn't make any difference to the use of the rack. This rack has just really held up absolutely fine, and I would be happy to keep using it for years to come. After all the miles, it's still going strong, and there really isn't that much sign of wear or tear. But my real question with this rack is who it's actually for. Who could I honestly say this is the perfect rack for you? Answering this question is not so easy, because I chose this rack because I wanted something that would wear less than a seat post bag because of the unique position I'm in making bikepacking videos week in and week out. While I love seat post bags, I've used them for ages. Ultimately, they wear out a lot faster than a rack. Metal versus fabric. One will always outlast the other. For most people, a seat post bag will last a long time because, well, they're not using it week in, week out in all different conditions, and they probably won't really notice the difference in wear. This rack sits in a slightly strange position because it's quite heavy compared to other racks, although if you have a few different bikes that you need it to fit, it is likely to fit everything from narrow tyres to massive plus tyres. Something a lot of other racks on the market don't quite offer, although they are getting a lot better. So it is good for people who need a rack to fit different bikes while just owning one rack, especially with different tyre sizes and axle spacing. The other reason someone might choose this rack over others is if you have no rack mounts but don't want to use a through axle mounted rack. Those have become increasingly popular for people wanting to use lighter, racier bikes that don't typically have any mounting points for racks. But the downside is that if you have a mechanical at the side of the road, you have to remove the rack whenever you need to remove the wheel. A lot of these are quick release and not that big of a deal, but it's still something you have to do. How much that bothers you will of course depend on you, but I've always found that the thought of dealing with a rack every time I needed to remove a wheel to be a bit of a deal breaker. I would much rather have something that is fitted and forgotten about. It's a minimal rack and you can add more cradles if needed, which is nice if you decided to go on both longer or shorter trips, as you can adapt it to your liking. After 4,000 miles with the Aeroe rack, I think for me it was a perfect choice as a replacement for a seat post back that wouldn't wear down as quickly and could fit a dry bag. That's all I needed it to do, and it did that perfectly. I think if you are looking at this rack, it's important to understand that it isn't for everyone. I wouldn't be looking at this rack if you are someone who wants to load lots and lots of gear. While it does have a rating of 16 kilograms across the 3 cradles, I think if you want to load it anywhere near close to that weight limit, I would be looking at a more traditional rack if you can fit it on your bike. If you are in that admittedly very niche market, then this rack is well built, worked really well, and while I would say the recommended retail price is a bit too much to pay, the more common sale price of around £80 to £90 is a little bit easier to stomach. I think it will last a long time and gives you a bit more versatility in how much you can carry or how you carry. However, having said that, I won't be continuing to use this rack because I will now be using Restrap's switch rack for a couple of reasons which I'll be going over in the next video. So make sure to subscribe to the channel for more of the technical side of bikepacking, and if you're interested in watching the actual adventures, then check out the main channel at Keep Smiling Adventures. See you in the next one, keep smiling and enjoy the adventures.